Welcome to everyone. In this week's video you will learn how powerful and profitable are the cycles, and how to use them to trade the gold market and the Dow Jones Industrial Average to increase your profits. This week's video will cover the gold market for the week of April 8, 2024, and a brief update on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Before we start, make sure you read carefully the disclaimer. Let's start with the gold market. The gold price on the cash market reached $2,350 on April 5. A new all-time high, but to analyze the gold market, I will use the GLD ETF. This week we will focus on the two most important cycles we expect to make a peak: the 80-day cycle and the 40-day cycle. Let's start by the 80-day cycle. Last week on April 5, the gold ETF2 reached a new all-time high at 215.74. The 80-day cycle peak is still to come and should form very soon, since the 80-day cycle low is expected to form on April 22. The last week all-time high was already on the right part of the cycle, after the red dashed line, confirming the gold market is still very bullish. In this case we can expect a moderate correction. The next 80 days low for the gold ETF should find support on his cycle lines. At that time the lines will be at 200 and 199. But due to the bullishness of the gold market, it looks very unlikely the gold ETF will find support on his cycle line. The next low is scheduled for the end of June, and should cross below his cycle line, providing a potential downside target. But in the future update, we will come back on this possibility. The purple trend line is the 80-day cycle trend line, what's Hurst called VTL. VTL stand for valid trend line. We will use this trend line to confirm the 20-week cycle peak. When the next 80 days cycle low will be confirmed, I will adjust the trend line. And when the gold ETF will cross below it, this will confirm the 20-week cycle peak is formed or in formation. The success rate for the 80-day cycle is 63%. The cycle trend for this week is down. The 40 days cycle. The last 40 days cycle low was on March 19, like expected on the roadmap. To get more details, I recommend to watch my last gold weekly update. The next low is expected on April 22. Technically at that stage of the cycle, the gold ETF supposed to cross below his cycle line. But due to the bullishness in the gold market, the low may only find support on his cycle line. The first 40 days cycle peak occurred on the right part of the cycle, the red solid vertical line, which is bullish. So we can expect the second peak will occur at the peak of the cycle or even before. In this case the peak is due now. We will know when the gold ETF formed his 40 days peak, when the market will cross below the 20 days cycle trend line. The success rate for the gold ETF 40 days cycle is 100%. Since the previous low was on March 19, the cycle trend is up for this week. Since we have few signals on the short-term cycles, let's have a short update on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Let's start with the 40 days cycle. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has formed the 40 days cycle peak on March 28. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is on his way to form his 40 days low on April 14. We have the confirmation of the 40 days cycle peak, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed below his 20 days cycle trend line, on April 2. That's the power of the cycle in trading. With the crossing of the cycle trend line or VTL, we know in advance which peak is forming. Then we can anticipate the degree of the correction. In this case, we will deal with the 40 days cycle correction. We know at that stage of the cycle, we can expect the market will at least find support on his 40 days cycle lines, even before the market crosses below his cycle line, which will provide a precise target. The market crossing the cycle lines will confirm the 40 days cycle peak is already formed. How do we draw the cycle trend line? We will see in the 20 days cycle analysis. The 40 days cycle peak formed right on the peak of the cycle. The red dashed line. The success rate is 86% and the cycle trend pointing to the downside. The 20 days cycle. The Dow Jones Industrial Average follow very well the roadmap. On this roadmap, last week, I was expected the Dow Jones Industrial formed a high around the first week of April. The high occurred on March 28, few days early. I was expected the market cross below his cycle line around the second week of April. It's happened few days early too. The last trading signal was on April 2nd, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed below his cycle line at 39,365 for a potential downside target at 38,526. Or a potential profit of 681 points or 1.74%. On April 4th, the Dow Jones Industrial Average formed a low at 38,559, only 33 points above the target. Since the low was within the 1% of margin of error, the target is considered neat. The success rate is 91%. What's next? Let's see where we are on the roadmap. Like mentioned above, the Dow Jones crossed below his cycle line on April 2nd, few days before expected. So this week we are here. Now we still expect the low for April 14th, but he looks like the cycles run little bit shorter. So there is possibility the low will form few days early. Last week I also mentioned this target should certainly be very close to the 40-day cycle line. Last week the Dow Jones found support on his cycle. Then the Dow Jones Industrial Average should rally again, crossing back above his 20-day cycle line, providing an upside target for the 80-day cycle peak. Then the market will cross again below his cycle line, providing a downside target for the 80-day cycle, with a first low around the first week of May, then rally, using his cycle line as resistance. Then resume his decline to form the 80-day cycle low on May 18th. This week, the cycle trend is up for Monday and Tuesday, and down for the rest of the week. Let's see how to draw the cycle trend line, or what's Hurst called ETL. I call it cycle trend line, to make easy to understand. Unlike the traditional trend line, this trend line have to be drawn with specific rules. This line have to be drawn between two lows of the same cycle. In this case we have to identify the last two 20-day cycles. The first one is on March 11th, and the second one on March 26th. So we connect the two lows with a trend line. When the market crossed below this trend line on April 2nd, the high formed before the crossing become the high of the next longer cycle. In this case we deal with the 20-day cycle lows, then the next longer cycle is the 40-day cycle. So we know this peak is the 40-day cycle peak, and we can expect the market will at least find support on his cycle lines. The same day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed below his cycle line. This confirmed the 40-day cycle peak and give a precise target at 38,526. The 40 days lower cycle line is at 38,739. So, on April 2nd, we know there is an important support around 38,739. The 10 days cycle. On April 2nd, the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed below his cycle line at 39,365.44, giving a potential target at 38,841, or 523 points or 1.33%. On April 4th, the Dow Jones Industrial Average made a low at 38,559.42, meeting the target. Trading this signal, we made a profit of 523 points or 1.33% in 2 days. The April 4th low was the 10 days low. The next 10 days low is scheduled for April 11th, the yellow zone on the chart. In my last week update, this 10 days low was expected to form on April 2nd. It formed 2 days later. The cycle trend for this week is down. What's next? Technically, the Dow Jones Industrial Average should rally toward his cycle line. Use it as resistance and resume his decline to April 11th to form the next 10 days low. After forming the next 10 days low, the Dow Jones Industrial Average should cross above his cycle line, providing a new trading signal and an upside potential target. Here are the resistance lines and their potential target, in case if the Dow Jones Industrial Average cross above them this week. The success rate for the 10-day cycle is 100%, meaning each signal provide a profit. In conclusion, on the gold market, the overall market is still very bullish. On the Dow Jones Industrial Average, still bullish too, but we can see there is little bit of bearishness coming to the market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is on his way to form the next 40-week cycle peak, and the low for this cycle is expected around mid-July. If you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future important videos. If there is a special market you are interested in, please do not hesitate to mention it in comment below. This is the end of this week's video. Thank you for following me. Next week, I will publish another market update.